And we're live, and this is Adapt, Create, and Innovate, a series that's sponsored by TIL, which is Technology Innovation and Law, to support the creative entrepreneurial community in dealing with this COVID-19 economy. And we have the pleasure of Theo Goetemann from Basil Labs, who's on today. And before we start, Theo, I'd like to give a shout out to all the first responders, to all the line workers, to the healthcare workers and others who are doing their job so that we're able to shelter in place and to do our thing. So thanks to them for that.
Definitely.
And so let me start things off by asking you for a soundbite. Can you give us a real short soundbite about who are you and what is Basil Labs?
Sure. So my name is Theo Goetemann. I have a background in policy and do a lot of data science now. Always interested in trying to understand communities online and how that transforms and translates into physical space. COVID is just a really unique situation. So with Basil Labs, COVID has definitely changed us, but fundamentally what we do is try and understand consumers, understand what they value, and then understand where they go.
Well, thank you for that. That fit in very nicely. And for the audience, we noticed you've done some collaborative projects with a number of colleagues, one with an organization, Area Probe, for real estate and consumer preference, another that was very well publicized with a colleague who was doing location of testing for COVID-19 based on proximity. How does that fit into your purpose as a person and also the purpose for Basil Labs?
That's a good question. I think that me personally, it takes a bit to reconcile how we can make a difference with COVID and then also have that reflect in the mission statement of an organization. So I'm still working on that, to be honest. I dove into things with the Coronavirus Testing Locator Center, this platform where you can find nearby testing sites. I just dove into that because Rakan Iqbal at the Georgetown Venture Lab, he runs social. He said, I can do half of this. Can you do the other half? I can build it out and can you provide the data? I said, sure. So, I think it's good to dive into things without actually knowing exactly how it's going to fit into your business model. It's a new time with COVID, right? So at least for me, it's my first time dealing with a crisis and also running a startup. And so, instead of trying to desperately make everything fit, maybe go more with the flow and see where you can fit in. So still trying to reconcile the two, but there's a personal interest on trying to take my skills and make it applicable, as well as my organization as a whole, and see how we can help there. So, yeah.
Wow, the flexibility of your mental model in doing these things and then adapting them into or incorporating them into Basil Labs' mission sounds fascinating. And so I know that you're an established serial entrepreneur because you've done some prior things in your career. Of all these things that you've done and that you're thinking about, what's an outrageously creative moment that gave you some incredible inspiration?
Yeah, I think that, one outrageous moment would definitely be starting my first startup as I was a co-founder, and being able to ideate with my co-founder and together just have respective platforms or of knowledge and bring those together. So in this case, it was urban planning and then understanding digital communities through natural language processing and machine learning. I think that's the most clear example of a nice synergy there. Outrageous, though, I think is like the daily ridiculous ideas that go through, I think, everyone's heads, right? And I think everyone has ridiculous ideas all the time. So one of my most recent ones was everyone takes photos of their dogs all the time. I actually have two ideas off of dog ones. I'll tell you a shorter one. There are a lot of dog walking apps right now. And these dog walking apps, you can rate the dog walker, which is very personal, right? Like, oh, they did a good or bad job. But the dog walkers have zero uh, ability to communicate their own feelings. So I think a sister app, right, where you can rate people's dogs that you've walked is just equally important. And it's a ridiculous idea, but yeah, I think that everyone has these crazy ideas always, and so an outrageous moment would just be these daily, really quite dumb ideas. But then just thinking about something, applying a business model to it, or ideating like how could this be a business, or yeah, and so navigating dumb ideas in a productive way, I think is definitely where I find my daily outrageous moments.
Well, I got to thank you for that. And it's funny because sometimes things that are outrageous or creative are until they're not. And then they're mainstream or they somehow affect the public conscious. Your description of events, though, reminded me of an episode of Black Mirror, which is a streaming series that was on Netflix. And in that episode, a person's ability to function in society was dictated by their social media cred. So you need to have a certain level of social media likes to be able to travel, to be able to do certain things. And interestingly enough, as I look at some of the things that are happening, you mentioned dog walking in restaurants and in service providers, there is that rating piece that's going into it. So it might have seemed outrageous before I watched Black Mirror's episode, but it's becoming less so and perhaps more plausible as I see the way ratings are going. So
definitely, one of the conversations we're having these days with cities and with retail is this idea of evaluating safety through similar to like a Yelp review. And there's a lot of, I think, like wariness around the ethics of giving people power to now deem this place safe or unsafe, because even though, in terms of the data side, we might be able to take in everyone's ratings of what's safe and what's not in their community, and then replace that on like a weekly basis, right? And everyone, if it's more than 7 days old, it goes away, the data. But the effect in people's minds, and Yelp has this once in a while, right? Where there's someone, for one reason or another, the community is not very happy with this business owner and they bombard it with reviews. I think that actually has quite a limited effect. You need hundreds or quite a few, maybe not hundreds. I'm not an expert in bombarding Yelp profiles, but you need a number of people to do that. But with safety, it's such a thing close to home, especially with something you can't see, right? It just goes through the air. There's a lot of power in giving people the ability to review spaces. Something to wrestle with. I don't think there's an easy answer for it on being able to source community input for COVID safety, because cameras can capture so much. You can have safe, like police capture a bit, but you really need to rely on the community. What kind of tools do you give them, and how do you report that? What options do you give them? It's tricky business right now.
Well, I will say this, then I can totally see an entire discussion and episode just focused on the wisdom of the crowd. And I think there was a TV or media series about a startup entrepreneur who used the crowd for everything, crowdsourcing, crowdfunding. And at the same time, I could also see kind of a countervailing discussion with my perspective as an attorney, saying, okay, is our system even designed to absorb that? But that is an exciting opportunity. But the pivot is back to this. You shared a bit about your innovation, your outrageous creativity, the core for Basil Labs. Let's go a little bit deeper. What is it? Who are you as an entrepreneur and a person? What is it that's driving you to pursue this path in life and with your organization?
Yeah, I think an anecdote's the best way to answer that. Is my dad always said, get a nice white collar job. He's was a cabinet maker for a lot of years, is a contractor now, and builds residential homes. And the idea of working for yourself is has perks, but it has a lot of downsides. So originally I wasn't going to go into entrepreneurship at all. I always have side projects. So I guess if I had a better marketing sense of how to market myself for all those years of after graduation and during undergrad, I think I could have marketed myself as a serial entrepreneur in the making of constant projects with people and lots of collaboration. But I didn't market myself that way. It was just side projects that I'm always doing just out of personal interest. I'll stay up extra hours and try and do some research here or there, depending on what skills I can bring in. I wasn't doing data science for all of my, maybe 3 out of the 4 years of my undergrad. And so, yeah, so the anecdote is that my dad said, don't work for yourself, work for someone else. Everything's taken care of. Even better, join the Army, right? All those benefits afterwards are incredible. And I see people who have it all set up, right? So no, it was really just, I became an entrepreneur because it started as a research project that just spun out into something more sustainable. And that's how I ended up understanding, I think, for a field that I never really entered. And I understand that there's a lot of people in higher education now that are very excited about entrepreneurship. It's not something I ever touched. I was interested in data policy. And so it went from there. I'd say 2 threads out of that are working with people constantly, always collaborating, and having a lot of, I do think that it's a bunch of lone wolves that come together for a wolf pack rather than like a bunch of people who are meant to work together already. So I do tend to work with people who are very in their own skill set and they do their own thing and we come together once in a while. But always collaborating gives me more ideas quicker instead of trying to just sit there and look at the clouds and think, what is the next idea? And the other thing is just incorporating skills quickly. I think that really changes how you can think about things. And even just running Basil Labs, I make sure that everyone has, they understand what's going on in each other's minds in terms of the skills, the difficulty, and the work that they do. So I think a quick way of explaining, we have a shared Medium account. So Medium, don't block me or whatever. There's multiple logins all over the place, and Medium makes it extremely difficult to log in from multiple places. You have to constantly have so we have it connected to the shared email of Basil Labs, all the secrets here. But what we do is we have the team members because it's a good resource to read stuff, very short reads, and the data science researchers are liking the stuff that they're interested in or clapping. And then the marketing, liking their stuff. And then everyone should be able to reference something from anything that's liked and bookmarked. And the other person should have read that. And that idea, I think, brings people closer together in understanding each other's skill sets and then maybe getting excited and reading a bit more about someone else's skills that you don't have. So I try and take that to heart and just bring on different things. So learn a bit about marketing, learn a bit about this and that. I think that's a good way of trying to navigate creativity.
Well, that's a fascinating share, and I think one that will resonate strongly in organizations that are trying to adapt to COVID-19, whether they're bricks and mortar, bricks and clicks, or clicks. It's a great summary of the virtual organization, virtual corporation, and I think there was a Harvard Business Review article about that, of being able to bring together components quickly to solve a problem, and then after that's done, they each go and continue to pursue their own paths. And that kind of begs the question, from what you shared with us, is anything that you described been what you would call your innovation inspiration, or is there something else that's really driving your perspective on innovation?
I think my innovation or perspective on innovation is just hard work. There's no other way around it. I don't know if it's Ira Glass. It's like he says, it's like you need 100,000, or you need to work a lot at what you're doing before you can start trying to make something that's semi-decent that you're happy with, that's your own, truly your own, not just reflections of what you read or listen or ingest. So yeah, I try and just work hard at having ideas and work hard at thinking about things from different angles. And that means giving myself time in the morning to ingest information and just read a lot. And then, during the day, splitting up my time into tasks that I might not even get accomplished, but I give myself a certain amount of time to get that done and doing these short sprints. But I guess an iterative sprint, right? It's not just in the idea of finish the task and, a Kanban dashboard and go from there to there to there, but really just giving myself time to breathe when I'm going through stuff and reflect on it. And so I can reflect on what I was reading earlier. So it's maybe not the most helpful answer, but it's how I get any kind of inspiration, is just taking in new information and giving myself time to reflect on it through my tasks. I think you just need more hours. It's a forced process for me. It's not something that just happens naturally where you just, same with music. I mean, it doesn't just happen where you're like, that's maybe it does for some people, but for me, it's just, if I don't have an idea for a song, I just keep working on it. And I come at it from different angles. If I'm really stumped, I'll download like some samples, or I'll go on YouTube and listen to some cultural music that I've never heard before, or see if it activates something. And in the same way with ideas, if you should be able to make 3 ideas a day, or as many, how much time you have, but there's no other way around it. If you can't think of the ideas, you're doing it wrong. You have to take in more information from different angles and, reevaluate things. So that's how I definitely get my inspiration on the daily.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that. Briefly, 4 touch points. The first, you mentioned Ira Glass, and I saw him from NPR. I saw him at a show he did with Tig Notaro here in DC. So that was interesting, and I appreciate his perspective. The second that you mentioned was on music. I'm in the Caravan Palace right now, which is like neo swing. It's a French band. Get a chance, listen to it. They have.
I'm a fan. Yeah.
You're a fan. So there you go. And I think that the third thing that you mentioned is, in solving a problem, there's a line from a Robert De Niro movie, which I don't think it was one of his best, but I think it was still, he's Robert De Niro, so he's one of my favorite actors. And he was responding to someone's question about why did he look away before he took a shot at something. And his response was, sometimes you have to leave home to come back to get a fresh perspective. So all those things come together in, I think, influencing, at least from what I can tell, your creativity, and to some extent mine. And that kind of leads us to the money question. We're both at the Georgetown Venture Lab, which is, how do all those things come together to create value in your perspective and in your terms?
That's a good question. One thing I'd add on is maybe not, I don't know so much about, I watch all of the De Niro movies, but Cinema Paradiso is one of my favorite movies, and it's an Italian film, and same thing as, I can't quote it, but the main character Toto comes back to a changed town. He's a filmmaker, and it's the same thing of that. You get different kinds of, I'm sure that he got tons of inspiration from coming back after all that time. And I don't know, it strikes a chord there. Putting everything together to create value. I think that there is I'll split it into personal value and just more of a business value that's external, that people can visibly see.
Okay.
So for an external value of understanding, putting all this into a company that's working, I think it's really just finding your weak points and strengthening those. And that mindset of, if I don't have those skills, I can't just bring someone on who has those. I have to understand it too, in order for me to be a productive member of actually a conversation with that person that I bring on. I do believe in, if someone has a comparative strength in that, go for it, right? But you need to understand it too if you're the founder. There's no way around that. It's a stronger company, no other way. And so in the same way of it also, it gets your mind going, and it gets your mind excited on new paths that you didn't see were possible before. And I don't think it's just an expansion, but it's really a reevaluation of everything that you already hold internally, as well as an expansion into new fields. And that together, I think, is something that's very important to create business value. And so it can be shown in terms of who you choose as team members to support you, but also, the vice versa of what can you personally develop to bring to the team. And so this is a very human capital oriented answer, but yeah, it comes down to if every team member can also be an innovator and also have that attitude of taking in new information. I think that one of the best examples is a friend of mine, Noah, that you have met, has an incredible sense of not just full stack, development, which is his bread and butter, or human computer interaction, which is where he did his master's in, or data visualization, which is why I've known him for doing a lot of his work, and we've done work together on that. But he understands business models as well or better than I do, and he understands a lot more things that are way out of purview of what a developer would be. And not just having him, but being able to talk with him and have my own strengths. When both people have an attitude like that, or an entire team, it's a great way of creating value. Personally, I think giving yourself time to take in information also means that give yourself time to pursue projects that you're passionate about. Right now, I'm working on a project that's on how Trump can learn from Korea, and how there's an irony right now in that Trump can desperately wants to blame China. Right. Korea is down to blame China, or Koreans are down to blame China for the tourism loss, the economy, the virus in the first place, and it's because they had such a good response to Corona that their public eye has shifted away from the president. Right. And then Trump constantly plays on these his social media acumen. He's quite good at it, but for all of his strengths, people are still focusing on him because of a botched response here. It's not directly related to Basil Labs. It's something that I'm very interested in. It also let me try out for the first time different kinds of machine learning in other languages. Natural language processing in Korean is fascinating to me. And so these sorts of things are intangible gains personally, but they also benefit because if you come full circle, I'm now a better team player when I'm bringing new skill sets and then a new mindset to trying to create value for a business.
I appreciate that share. Thank you for that. And you're speaking to that reminded me of the fourth point that I mentioned previously, which is reading. So I understand from a specialty on Bill Gates that he reads a lot. So it sounds like you have that in common, you and Mr. Gates. On Soul,
I don't know about it. Sounds like he reads. Doesn't he have someone who carries around like a briefcase of books for him, or like some sort of I'm on 3-minute reads from Medium, and then if that's too much, I'll watch a YouTube video. I can't say that nearly close, but I've heard that reading is a great thing for.
Well, I understand there was a special, I think it was a Netflix special on him, and he'll take like a weekend, and he goes up to a cabin. He has like a portfolio binder. He takes some books that he wants to read. So yeah, there's probably a lot more to it, but I think to me it really says curiosity. It's like I'm happy with who I am, but I want to know more. It's a part of my self-actualization process. So my observation that you and he have that in common. And you mentioned South Korea. I'm a fan. I actually did some interaction with the Seoul Metropolitan Government. I went to Seoul, my partner and I. Fascinating economy, fascinating government, what they've been able to achieve after the Korean War. And it's just amazing to watch how they respond to things in generally a positive way. So definitely a model that a lot of governments and policymakers should and could consider. And that's a perfect setup to the next question, which is, do you have any words of wisdom to share with other creative entrepreneurs and people in this COVID-19 economy?
Yeah, again, to split it into two parts. For entrepreneurs, I think being flexible with your business model, maybe especially early stage, startups like myself. I think being flexible with your business model is a great way of starting the right conversations. You might not start the right conversations if you're never flexible in the first place of reaching out. And conversations are the best place to possibly get new ideas on actually finding a closer product market fit or understanding how your tech can be applied in different ways that you weren't expecting. So holding on even tighter right now, I think, is the wrong way to go. I just personal thoughts, I'm also going through it as well right now. But I think that we've had wonderful conversations by starting conversations, not just with people who are potential clients in different sectors, but with people who are aligned as potential partners, competitors, people who are just aligned within the industry. That those are the kinds of conversations that helped us branch out into new sectors and find good applications for our tech to actually help with the crisis. I think there's a second population out there that really can innovate, and that's just students. We've talked about this, Chris, right? And not just students, but anyone who really has a mind for learning. If you're learning right now, no one has the answers, so try something, right? And I think that just, there's only so much you can learn without just starting conversations or actually starting to learn a new skill, maybe a bit of coding, or maybe everything's around coding these days. But yeah, I think coding is a good way to start, right? If everyone's locked up at home. And with that, maybe you have a bit of a different mindset. You understand what's possible. Oh, I could just take a template that's already existing and make an entire business out of it. Or we can, help with COVID in our local community. And I think that that's a population that everyone's focusing on, entrepreneurs always. But this unactivated population probably has better ideas than all of us because they haven't even entered it yet. They don't have these sunk costs.
Right. Well said, and thank you for that. I think my perspective is I read somewhere that the United Nations had some data that roughly defined about 3 billion people around the world as being underserved. And my sense is that it's time for the underserved to be served along with everyone else. And that puts us in a position of having all 7.5 billion people around the world contributing to addressing the challenges we have, rather than just those who have access to that option. But I digress. And I got to ask you, what's next? What's next for you, and what's next for Basil Labs?
Next for me, I'm going to finish up this Trump and Korea article. I have a couple more that I'm interested in pursuing. Always, Mondays and Tuesdays in the morning before going to emails and LinkedIn and all this, the daily grind. Giving myself some time. So that's just, short term, enjoy that. For Basil Labs, and then also for me longer term through the summer, it's really about forming partnerships. I don't have all the tools for mapping these problems, and we don't have that much time. It's not like an established sector that we can now go into the files of the last, decade or two of COVID research. So as the news comes out, there's new developments, and then policy, takes in that news, and then, or politicians and legislatures and such, and then they make their decisions, and then more news, and it's hard to innovate if everything's changing. So if I don't have all the tools right now, I'm really trying to start conversations with people who have complementary tools that match our technologies, and then also connections into the right sectors, maybe without the technology, and trying to fit all those pieces together. It seems like this entire summer is going to be about safety and establishing what we're going to call, I think you can call, consumer trust equation. And really what we're trying to do there is establish safety, but it's not really about the safety. It's about the trust in that place that you're going to, or the trust in the institution that owns the place and manages it. And so it'll be an interesting thing, and I don't have the answers for it. So trying to reach out to people and talk more about that, and understand how to help establish trust at a municipal level, at a individual retailer level, at a nation level. Who knows?
Well, I definitely appreciate that share. And that sounds a lot like Ella, which is something I've seen and heard about. It brings to mind a phrase that is a legal test, which is called the totality of the circumstances that may apply. So it's interesting that you mentioned that. That came to my mind of how do you look at the scope of the entire decision process that someone's going to make if they're going to leave their door, enter a building, engage in a transaction. So re-enter the formerly traditional economy and social setting compared to post and prior to COVID-19. So I don't
That's
know.
fascinating.
So I'm looking forward to what comes out of Ella, though. By the way.
Yeah, I'm excited too. Ella's it's our trying out different logos right now. We have a tall owl, and we have a little stout owl. And let's see what people like the stout owl. It's much cuter. But regardless of the logo, very excited to see how people are going to use it. It's in a time where we have so much data collection for full for full explanation. Ella is a voice input survey so that you can query people's thoughts on any given topic. Really, the whole point is to foster open responses, not try and take people's data, but rather ask them graciously with a stout owl logo to ask them, hey, can you give us your thoughts? So you don't want to ask someone saying from 1 to 10, how much has COVID affected your commute? Horrible question. Instead, ask, how is your commute affected by COVID? How has your family been affected? And we can take all of that, use natural language processing, turn voice responses into really simple dashboards for decision makers to reduce that time between ingestion of data that's going to take a team of researchers a month to try and get through, and then try and put that nuanced findings into decision maker hands faster. So very excited about it. We'll see how it goes. Very excited.
Well, great fortune with that. And before we adjourn, any parting words of wisdom to share with the audience?
I would say try something now instead of read more. Not to say that Bill Gates is, I think reading is great, and I always have to do more of it. But I would say that instead of striving for perfection, start with conversations, and then now is the best time to jump in, and you can probably help. So jump in now.
All right. Theo, thank you so much for investing the time and sharing your perspective with the audience for ACNI, and continued success to Basil Labs and to you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you for having me on.
All right. Take care. Have a great week.
All right. Have a good one.
All right. Goodbye.
Bye.